No matter the time, morning, afternoon, or evening, any time is a good time to have coffee with the mayor. So let's join Mayor Steve Widmeyer as he goes in search of the people, places, and events, both current and historic, that make our community unique.
Well, welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Mayor. We've been on a bit of a sabbatical for a while, but we're back at it. We're going to do some shows, and we really have a great show today. And as always, I'm here with my co-host, Woody McEvers. There's a reason why we call this Woody TV, and it's because of Woody McEvers. So, Woody, great to have you here today.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
We have a very interesting guest, and Woody, I don't know in the history of our shows that we've done, and we've done many shows together, if we've ever had a doctor on the show. So we are honored today to have Dr. Stan Olson.
Pleasure.
Who is the interim superintendent. He is come up here from the Boise area, so he's the interim superintendent of our school district. And so we'll just start off, Stan, if you would like to just tell us kind of about your journey, where you've been and the things that you've done and kind of what brought you to Coeur d'Alene.
Well, I'd be happy to. My mother reminded me, my now 98-year-old mother reminded me that I'm a talking doctor, not a cutting doctor. But appreciate the opportunity. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan. Grew up in the state, attended the regional universities there, served the school districts in both Southeast Michigan and West Michigan for a number of years. For those of you who are baseball fans, our kids graduated high school with Derek Jeter, who went on to play a little baseball in New York. And then when we used to think Chicago was west, took a superintendency in Trona County, Wyoming, Casper, Wyoming area. And then was invited to look at Boise. Had never been to Idaho, had never been to Boise. Came there and saw, like Coeur d'Alene, what a wonderful city it was and what a terrific personal as well as professional opportunity the city represented. So our family moved to Boise, served the last 42 years of my career as the Boise superintendent. Our children moved there with our grandchildren and retired there, and was retired 7 years, working with another retired superintendent in educational software, and got a call from some residents of Coeur d'Alene about the need to help out the district with an interim superintendency. As many folks know, the district had a superintendent departure last spring. And the seated board was very interested in taking the time and putting a substantial effort into the selection of an ongoing superintendency, which I think was wise, very, very wise. By the way, this is a strong board of trustees here and a talented and insightful one. And one of their decisions was, let's go with an interim to support the work of the district and to target different issues that needed attention, and then lastly to help set the table for the ongoing superintendency. So I had the opportunity to come up, meet people, talk with people, and was offered the opportunity to serve. I have to tell you that one of the things I probably should have done is told my wife I was coming up to talk about that, because when the contract offer came, I was thinking, golly, how am I going to explain this? And went home and I thought, well, am I going to lose 2 nights' sleep if I tell her tonight or just one night? And I thought, no, we need to talk about it. And I said, we need to talk and yada, yada. And I said, we've been offered an opportunity to do a year's superintendency in Coeur d'Alene. And she said, oh, Coeur d'Alene. Did you take it? All was settled at that particular stage. So started actually a little early, right at the end of June, and have been working diligently with staff and citizenry and our terrific board of trustees since then. It's been a delightful experience.
I had kind of a similar story to yours in July of 2013, and I'd casually mentioned to my wife that I might run for mayor, and I forgot to tell her that I finally agreed to it. And she read it in the newspaper.
Oh man, you've paid for this gray hair.
Something slip your mind every once in a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
So did you say you were in Boise for how many years then?
I've been in Boise for about 15 years
Okay.
now, and
Right.
again, we came there around July of 2002, and have been there since then. It was our professional home and is our continuing home now.
Boise's great.
I have to ask you, Doc, you know, when we heard you came and we talked about bringing you on the show, it was real awkward because I'm thinking that, well, maybe he's in the running for the new guy's job. Is it fair to talk to him now when this will probably air the first of the year or so, or December? And so you're not in the running for this.
No. Actually, that was, I'll be a little casual in saying it, it was part of the deal. The idea was to come up and serve for a year.
Okay.
And again, you know, do the things I talked about, and particularly help set the table. I'm also supporting the board's efforts. They have engaged an executive search firm to help support the superintendent search. And our board chair, Casey Morserow, called me and said, well, we've hired McPherson Jacobson, which is probably one of the top 5 education executive search firms in the country, out of Omaha. And he said, you know the guy that's going to lead the program. And I said, really? I said, what's his name? And he said, Bill Dean. And interestingly, I said, is it the Bill Dean from Grand Haven, Michigan? And Grand Haven was Coeur d'Alene without the mountains. It was a resort community on Lake Michigan. Bill Dean had a terrific superintendency there and retired and went to work in Virginia. But he's the guy, and he now lives in Post Falls in the warm weather and knows this area extraordinarily well. So really able to support this process very effectively. But again, small world and relationships and all the rest of that.
So cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
You know, I think it's such a wise decision to bring someone in for a year. The superintendent job is such a huge job. And to somewhat rush a selection process, I think taking a year, bringing you in and taking a year to go through that whole process is so smart and so wise, because it is just so important that it's a big job. And as you know, being from Boise, what are the things that in your year's time here that you hope to accomplish? I'm sure you've taken some time to look at the school district and some things that you want to direct. Maybe talk about some things that you've been working on in the school district.
Okay. Well, the first one I've already mentioned, and that is supporting the hiring of the ongoing superintendency and preparing the board, the staff, the community for involvement in that, or supporting that. They're very well prepared in and of itself, but I can add to that relative to my experience with going through a hiring process about 4 times in my career at this level. That's one of the items. The second item is implementation of capital construction. As you know, the community generously approved a capital construction bond for the school district last spring. It involved some significant retrofitting and improvement at the 2 large traditional high schools, Coeur d'Alene and Lake City, as well as work at several elementary schools and the building of a brand new elementary school in the district. So our work is to help set that into motion. Again, I want to emphasize there are very talented people here, and they've been here for quite some time to lead that. My work is to make sure that it's profiled, that it's inclusive, that people understand that there are promises made and promises kept by this school district to move this forward. One of the side issues in this domain, boundaries. One of our responsibilities is to acquire some property for the placement of the elementary school, and we're having some challenges with that on the west side of the district to make that happen. And when I first came here, and I know the superintendents in our contiguous districts, Jerry Kane and I have been friends for 15 years, the superintendent in Post Falls, and then Becky Meyer, who's at Lakeland, is kind of a friend of many friends of mine along the way, so I know her through other folks. We've had some boundary issues with our districts, boundary annexation issues, where citizens purchase homes in areas they think are in one district or another, and then as they build their home and move in, they find out they're not in the school district that they had intended. And that prompts, in some cases, smatterings of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 homeowners to petition a particular district for annexation. We want you to take us into the school district and move us forward. One of our issues is that the boundaries of the city of Coeur d'Alene are not the same boundaries of the school district.
Right.
And that's problematic because people assume if you live in the city of Coeur d'Alene, that, God darn it, you're going to be in the Coeur d'Alene schools. We think all 3 school districts are strong and solid and high performing and high producing. So I don't think it's a question of quality of system. I think it's a question of preference and expectation. So I met with my colleague superintendents and said, the history of this is consistent. We've had annexation hearings for several years now where we pit the districts against each other and we kind of give high anxiety to our residents. I said, let's go to work on reestablishing our boundaries. As you know, as long-term residents here, the original school district boundaries were set years and years and years ago, and as they say back home, they were set in places where there weren't no people, where it was unpopulated, might have been in farming properties or agricultural areas or whatever. Well, now what's happened is there's development, and there is fast development and fast subdivisional efforts along the way, and we keep bumping into these boundary problems. So we've convened a discussion between and among the districts to kind of sit down and, in a quid pro quo fashion, in other words, not do any damage to the tax base of any of our districts, come up with a boundary reorganization that makes more sense and that is more definable so that we can talk with realtors and developers and our own citizenry and say, these are the boundaries that really represent the districts and the boundaries that we expect people will understand and respect along the way. So that's some work that has been discovered and that we have already started. We've already started our meetings with our colleague districts and it's gone quite well to begin with. It's a long process. At best, it's going to take 18 months. So it's going to follow the work I've done here, but if we can get this into motion, it makes sense. Those are a couple of things. So you want me to keep babbling here, Mayor?
I was just going to say, do those boundaries follow, the city calls their potential growth an area of impact, right? A city's area of impact. And the city of Coeur d'Alene has an area of impact which expands outside what our current borders are, but there's a line of what an area of impact is. I'm sure Hayden does and Dalton does. And do you try to follow, do you use that at all as a guide, that kind of area of impact? I believe in Coeur d'Alene, on the western side, the area of impact is Hutter.
Yep.
But there are some things east of Hutter that aren't in the city of Coeur d'Alene right now, but someday maybe, probably will be. So do you follow that area of impact?
Well, Hutter is one of the definable roads that we're talking about relative to a boundary reestablishment. The area of impact is in play. That's part of the discussion as to, again, how a transfer or how an exchange or a change in the current situation will impact the other districts. So that's one under discussion and observation.
It's good that we do have good neighbors, because there are some places where cities get into major battles over what their area of impact is.
Yeah, and we want to emphasize those are high-performing, strong school districts, and they're our friends and our colleagues.
Yes.
And boy, if we 3 can't come together and figure this out, then it can't be done.
Doc, I got to ask you a question. We were relating to to the money the folks voted for the bond, and you guys are doing all these cool projects with it besides building a school. There was an image too was talking about portables. And I remember growing up and going to junior high and high school, and I thought portables were the norm. And you guys sort of look at portables as temporary, not good things. Is that true?
Well, it depends on where you're from, and it depends on what your experience is. I recollect some of my superintendent colleagues in Florida had similar experiences to yours, where their schools developed so quickly that they could not keep physical plant up with population growth, and they established portable, I called them portable cities, behind the permanent physical plants. And I remember they used to patrol them in golf carts because there were so many. Now, we certainly don't have that many here, but there are enough of them, and not to sound disrespectful, they're really kind of substandard housing for programs. I mean, if you have the choice of having a fixed classroom in an established physical plant that students can get to very quickly and get from quickly onto the next class and so on and so forth, we'll take that any time over a portable. Portables also age much more quickly than physical plant placements. They add costs to the operation of the building because they're separate and apart from the building, and there's a whole bunch of issues. And we've had a bunch of portables in the district for a long time. One of the discussions I was reminded of by Steve Casey, who's done terrific job, former principal at Coeur d'Alene High School, who leads the Long Range Planning Committee, Lisa May, who was a member of that committee, who's now one of our board members. They reminded me and reminded the community that they postured the bond on getting rid of portables. And I think part of the success of that effort was people saying, hallelujah, let's say goodbye to those things and let's get our kids inside the building with everybody else.
Yeah, and unfortunately, portables is a function of funding, right?
Yep.
Can't build new schools fast enough to accommodate the students. You have students, you have to put them somewhere. You can't have class sizes of 35 and 40 kids. You have to have other classes. So portables are a function of funding.
Absolutely. And they have been a good fallback for the district. And the portables, and I've visited every school site. Actually, I've probably been in all of them at least 2 or 3 times now. And the Brian Martin, who's our facilities and operations person, has done exceptional work with his colleagues to keep those portables as well maintained as possible, up to snuff as possible, and healthy, positive environments. But they are what they are. And I think the people in the community told Lisa, told Steve, if we do this, our target should be removing those portables and getting kids inside the major physical plants.
I was just out at Skyway last week, and I love to go talk to the young kids, the elementary kids especially. They think I'm really important, those elementary kids.
You have a
they get a little,
too,
they get a little older. They don't think I'm quite so important.
But what's nice about that is you put a human face on the mayor's position and the operation of the city. And at this stage of their lives, that's extraordinarily important because they say, I can see myself being part of that. I can see myself being attached to that. That's not something ethereal and a million miles away. It's a real person who is just like me or just like who I want to be. So thanks, Mayor, for doing that.
And those kids are so inquisitive. Really, I could go there, and I'm usually there for half hour or 40 minutes. I could just start off and say, who has questions? And they all raising their hand, and I just love it. So, Stan, you've been in education for a long time, and you've seen the kind of the evolution of education. Education's is changing so much, and maybe we'll just talk a little bit about high school education. And there's a big push for going into getting kids more ready for employment right out of high school, that there aren't all kids that are immediately ready to go on to college or even want to go to college. They want to go into trades. I was talking with a friend of mine from North Idaho College that runs the auto collision repair program for North Idaho College, and he says he has some high school kids in there. So how do you see that? And is that a change that you've seen gradually happen? What do you see as the future? That being in education as long as you have, how do you see that evolving? That kind of high school to work program rather than a high school to college program?
Well, we refer to that as a pathway discussion, and it's as long as there's been formalized education, not only in the United States but in the world, we've had that discussion about the tug of war between starting one's life in a vocational setting as opposed to a post-secondary education setting, or some blend of those types of experiences, or another, the military or something else along the way. I had a chance not only to be part of that discussion for 42 years in this country, but in other countries. I've done some work in China and done some work. I have a very, very good friend who just spent another month and a half with us this summer from Finland. Finland is supposed to be the educational leader of the world.
Right.
And Marco Lampi, my friend of 50 years, always chuckles when he hears that, and saying any Finn would cut off his right arm, well, maybe his left arm, to come to school in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and be part of that. Because of the choices, because of the opportunities, the options available. The European model up to very recently for most countries, and still in most countries, was around 8th grade. You made the decision that basically determined the rest of your life. You took, and by the way, it's true in Asia and the key schools of the People's Republic of China. If you're not hitting on all cylinders and high academic performance by about the equivalent of 8th grade in the States, you're going to into a vocational situation. In this country, a vocational situation could portend very, very positive outcomes. It's not a bad location. I'm from Detroit, and I graduated, I'll tell you how old I am. I graduated high school in 1967. And I went to a very large population high school, about 1,000 in my graduating class, but about 650 graduated. And when we started doing reunions and looking for what happened to everyone else, the answer was Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, best pay structure in the world, best retirement structure in the world. These folks are now living in the villages in Orlando or Marco Island, Florida. And they used to say, Stan, why are you still working? And they went in that direction. Other folks, higher ed. And the situation basically is a very positive one here because we have pathways and we have resources to underpin those pathways. NIC, Rick McLaren's presidency there has really emphasized that on a consistent basis. K-Tech, the vocational cooperative between Lakeland, Post Falls, and Coeur d'Alene. There are machining classes there, and for years the word has been machining's dead. That we've got to stop training kids for the 20th century and the 21st century. Well, the reality is that all the machinists who have been making $45 an hour and producing parts and materials that have to be precision made for virtually everything that runs in this country are retiring. They're 70 years old. They're 68, 70 years old, just like I am. And they're retiring, and there's no one in the pipeline to replace them. Well, guess what, folks? K-Tech has a machining program, as does NIC. And they're very strong programs, they have good placement, and they're teaching a skill that is still very much tied to the fabric of American commerce. Those are the things we have to do a better job on. The other concept, and you two know this as well as I do, because you've experienced it in your lifetime, job changes. People making critical decisions at age 18 suddenly change their minds at age 21 or 22 or 23 or 25. Or, my intent in life was to be a high school history teacher and maybe a counselor. And none of that ever happened. I mean, I loved teaching and all the rest of that, but the world changed around me and us. Well, that's happening a lot faster for kids today and families. And the idea here is to prepare kids for multiple pathways, multiple experiences, allow them the chance to circle back and come to wonderful schools like NIC or the higher ed institutions with which they partner. You know, we've got to remind kids that they're making critical decisions, but in this country, you've got choices and opportunities to circle back. When you circle back, it costs you more money, though. If you're not real definitive on those choices, that $65 class that you could have had when you were in high school is now $265 per credit hour along the way. So the idea is to define opportunities, define pathways, and have people recognize there's lots of opportunities in lots of domains out there.
You know, and you make a great point. I think that may be one of the biggest differences in education from back in my day, 1978, graduating from high school.
Oh, what a youngster.
Yeah, that there are so many opportunities. And I think North Idaho College has created some, K-Tech has created some, University of Idaho, Lewis and Clark. There are so many educational opportunities in Coeur d'Alene. And it's those choices that I think part of our job, and of course the education, your job would be to just put those choices in front of those kids. Lead them to an area where they're comfortable with, that they're interested in, and show them that they've got all those choices.
Yep. And again, among the wonderful things about this community is they're all here. Yeah. We don't have to torpedo kids 50 miles north, south, east, or west to avail themselves of these. They're right here.
So we've come to the end of our show.
Wow.
Boy, what a fantastic conversation. We could go on for a couple more hours just learning about your experiences and what you bring, but we are so fortunate to have you here for this year. But the one thing that I'm going to ask is that you and your wife maybe consider maybe a summer home after your year, or so you can spend more time in Coeur d'Alene, because we enjoy the job that you're doing, and we're just really, really grateful to have you here leading our district at this time.
Well, thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here. Pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with the Mayor.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Coffee with the Mayor. Plan to join us for future programs where Mayor Steve Widmeyer takes a break and sits down to discuss issues of community interest. We would like to take this chance to thank the following sponsors for their support: Rustler's Roost and Spectrum Cable. So brew a pot of your favorite blend and sit down with us next time when we once again have Coffee with the Mayor.